This is a myth.
For you, yeah.
Dark Matters.
Welcome back to Dark Matters. I'm Sky Phillips. Now, we're into part 2 of UFOs and aliens, angels or demons. Now, in part 1, our special guest, Joe Jordan, was describing his findings with MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. Now, Joe is the MUFON National Director for South Korea and a MUFON Rapid Deployment Star Team member, as well as a member of the MUFON Inner Circle. Joe also co-founded CE4 Research, which investigates alien abductions. Now, Joe, we were covering how you found credible evidence that abductions aren't exactly what many of us believe they are. Now, as you were talking in part 1, you say most people never get a chance to see UFOs and aliens from a different perspective. And it was changing your faith.
In MUFON, we get a lot of people that say, hey, we don't want that Christian viewpoint, or we don't want this viewpoint. We don't want this viewpoint. You know, if you're doing honest research and you want an honest picture of this phenomenon, you need all these viewpoints. You can't just say you don't want that piece of the puzzle or that piece. You have to have every piece put on the table to get a full picture of what this is. And, you know, since I had that opportunity to hold different pieces, you know, I know how important this is. I'm glad I was able to hold other pieces, okay? And I welcome those other pieces. I may not agree with them, but I welcome them because they hold a piece of information that needs to be looked at. Whether it needs to be looked at as part of something advantageous, or it needs to be looked at as something that we can rule out, okay? But it has to be available to be used either way.
Yeah,
okay?
I think that whenever you do research like that, when you open it up and you do all of it, you'll find out how many of these pieces fit together with people who don't know each other, haven't seen the same thing, have been abducted, maybe have a different perspective in what's happened to them. And that's exactly what CE4 research does, right?
Right.
Yes.
Right. Now, into this 4 years came about. Now we're at 1996. 1996 was a busy year. 1996, got involved with a number of things going on. I got invited to be a participant in a public rally in front of the Kennedy Space Center by a fellow that was working at Jet Propulsion Laboratories. And I thought, what is this about? You know, because I wasn't much for doing public protests or public rallies or anything like that. Maybe back in the 70s, I would have been up for that. But, you know, here it is up at 20 some years later, you know?
Yeah.
And so I heard the guy out and he had a neat spiel, okay? But it was a little outside my realm. But I took it to ear. And this guy at JPL, what he was telling me was, he says, in November 4th, election day that year, he said, there's going to be a rocket launch out of Kennedy Space Center. I said, okay, happens to be where I live. He says, it's going to be a satellite that's going to orbit Mars called the Mars Global Surveyor. This was our first return to Mars in 20 years since Viking.
Yes. Yep.
And I said, so why is this important to me, you know, as a UFO researcher? He says, well, here's the deal. He says, how much do you remember about the Viking pictures? And I said, I don't remember anything. He says, well, let me give you a little update. He says, you ever heard anything about the face on Mars? I said, yeah, from the tabloids.
Yeah.
He says, well, there's a lot of people that believes it's a lot more than tabloid material.
Yes.
I said, okay. And he told me about this book written by Richard Hoagland. called the Monuments of Mars, and it's about this thick. I mean,
Wow.
it's huge, and the work and the research that went into that. And supposedly, it's not just the face, but it's a whole area called the Plain of Sidonia, and all the monument locations that are covered the Plain of Sidonia. And if you look at it geometrically and all the lines that crisscross and everything,
Yeah.
it comes out with what they figured out was a hyperdimensional physics. And it's quite fascinating when you get into this stuff. And I thought, okay, you might have something there, but this is not an area I really want to get deep into.
Yeah.
But I'll hear you out. And so he told me everything that was going on. He says, here's the deal. This Mars Global Surveyor is going to launch in November. And this was we're talking June or July when he contacted me. And I'm busy. I'm working full time at this boat company still for 20 some years and running MUFON group and doing investigations and
You're a busy
the
man.
whole works. I'm a busy man. And he wants to tag this on and me put on a full blown rally out in front of the Space Center. And here's the idea of the rally. The Mars Global Surveyor is going up to photograph the planet Mars, rephotograph the planet Mars with high resolution cameras after 20 some years from Viking. And Sidonia is not on the photograph docket. And he's going, that's crazy.
Yeah.
We want pictures of that area to settle this once and for all. Was that really something or just, strange
Mountains
light
or
images?
whatever. Yeah.
So the idea was to hold this rally to petition for NASA to put Sidonia and the face on the docket for photographs when that Mars Global Surveyor makes its rotations.
Yes.
And I said, that's all this is about? And they said, yeah. And I said, let me run this by my group. Well, like I said, I wasn't interested in this stuff, but I ran it by the group and everybody knew about this stuff but me.
Yeah.
And I thought, what am I missing here?
Yeah.
and they were like, oh, yeah, we got to do this. We got to do this. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, you guys are going to help, right? And I said, yeah, we'll help. So everybody helped. We all made these giant posters and banners, and we had a rally out front of Kennedy Space Center at the main gate on the causeway. I got pictures. You'll love them. Newspaper gave us an article. It was great.
Yeah.
One thing I told him, though, I said, I'd like to get permission to use Hoagland's videos. He did a great video that he did when he spoke at the UN. And I said, I know that's on VHS. I'd like to be able to get permission to show that publicly to educate people, to get them encouraged about this rally. He says, I'll do you one better. I said, how's that? He says, I'll see if Hoagland will come there and talk himself. I said, really?
Wow.
He says, yeah. He says, I'll get back with you. So sure enough, a few days later, he calls back and he says, I'm going to put you in contact with Hoagland. He's going to tell you what he needs. I said, really? And he goes, yeah. So I end up talking to Richard by phone. Richard tells me what he needs. Says, need an auditorium. See if you can get 500 minimum seating. Okay. And I says, what are you charging? No charge. It's going to be free. I says, who's paying for this? He says, I am. Okay.
Wow.
So local junior college there had a huge auditorium. I went and talked to them, got the price, ran it by Richard. He says, that'll work. So the Sunday night, the 4th was on a Tuesday. That was the plan for the launch, the rally, the whole works. And he wanted to do the talk on Sunday night. So we had to have the talk on Sunday night. He talked for 4 hours.
Wow.
Nonstop. No break.
No kidding.
No kidding. And this place was standing room only.
Wow.
Yeah. So we did the rally. He was there with us at the rally and then moved out to the press site. And the whole thing was great. But during this time, all this was going on. right after this was all finished. And by the way, the end of the story is, but the pictures that they did bring back from Mars Global Surveyor, nothing like Viking. To them, it was very discouraging. To me, I was done with that. I mean, to me, that was all light and shadows from Viking. I didn't really, I think that it was, one of those Where's Waldo type of deals.
Yeah.
So I didn't put any more effort into all of that. Some people still follow all that stuff, but
yeah. I think the bigger issue is right here on this planet. I've often believed, and I've thought about this for years, that these alien beings aren't aliens. I feel they are demons, that CE4 could help these people out.
Well, theory is one thing, belief is another thing. But let's get to the evidence.
Okay.
That's where we're headed. And that's what I'm going to bring to you today is the evidence for what we have, for what this is. And then you don't have to believe, you don't have to theorize. You'll have exactly what it is.
Yes.
So what happens, taken back to where we were, this busy time right here, there are also a couple disturbing cases I was working on that were very dark in nature.
Okay.
And once we got through this was all happening at the same time during this rally event, the whole works. Wow. So once the rally was over, I was exhausted. I wasn't married at this time. I had a girlfriend. She was working with us as one of our investigators with abductions. And I'm glad she was, because anybody that knows anything about this field, it's primarily women that go through the abduction experience. And if you are doing interviews when cases with abductions with these women, a lot of the stuff that you hear is very sexual in nature.
Yes.
It's not a good position to be in, to sit in one-on-one, having to listen to all this stuff. So it was good to have her there, either present, or what I preferred was just to let her do them herself, and then she could relay the information to us so we could record it. Well, my girlfriend was a professing Christian.
Okay.
Me, remember, I was a crystal rolling New Ager. And that was okay because we really liked each other. And we agreed, just don't talk about politics and religion. We get along fine. So that's worked out great.
Yeah.
And came to this one point, though. She realizes one Saturday, and she realized that I was exhausted, and she felt bad for me and felt that, like, I needed some kind of help in this, and that she couldn't give me. And she wanted to help. So she says, I think you need some serious protection in this realm that you're working in. And I says, what do you mean? She says, I think there's some serious dark forces here that you don't realize. Yes. And you're not covered in this. And I said, yeah, I'm protected. I reached in my pocket, pulled out my gemstones, and I said, this. Yeah,
I'm protected.
Everything I need. She says, no. She says, I think you need something way more than that. And I said, well, what do you got? I was always looking for the next good thing to have.
Yeah.
And she goes to hand me a Bible. I says, no, we agreed not to do that. And she says, I think you need to look in here. And I said, no, we talked about this. And then she says, you know what? You tell everybody you're the most open-minded, objective investigator there is. Well, I'd just been had. I said, all right, you got a few minutes. Show me what you got. Well, she took the scriptures, read me the gospel message, and I got to hear it in a way that I had never heard it before.
Yep.
Why that time? I don't know. I know I'd heard it before, but I'd heard it like never before. And when she was done, I was so moved. And I said, you know what? I want that protection.
Yes.
And That day, November 10th, 1996, I gave my life to Jesus Christ.
Great for you.
I became a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just become into another worldview. I'm still a UFO researcher.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm beginning to look at everything through a new perspective.
Yep.
Not sure what it looks like yet, but my lead field investigator, the one I co-founded CE4 with, he was a Christian also, but
Mm-hmm.
he never put all this together at the time as a believer either. And he knew better than to try and, profess Christianity to me. He just behaved himself and worked with me. But he was sure glad that I finally made a profession of faith so that he could talk with me. And I said, you know what? I'm an inquisitive guy. I want to know what a Christian is now that I am one. I said, got any study programs I can do that I can learn real fast and not have to sit through 50 Sundays to get an idea what a Christian is?
Yeah.
He says, yeah, I've got this friend. He worked at the Space Center. And he says, I got this buddy I work with. He's got this study course. It's all on VHS tape, 2-hour tapes. There's 14 of them. We can sit through one a night. I said, it just so happens at Christmas time over the holidays, I got 2 weeks off at the boat company. We could do one a night. He says, let's make a plan and do it. Yeah. So we took the 2 weeks. We watched these videotapes that were study course in scripture, and very intense, very deep. So I learned a lot real fast. But it was one night. We're sitting there in the gentleman's living room. I'm on the couch and puts the tape in, and the guy comes on. And he says, we're going to talk about spiritual warfare. I had no idea what spiritual warfare was or meant. Never heard the word before.
I know.
But it sounded cool.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there going, yeah, this is going to be good. And he starts out by reading Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the spiritual wickedness in the heavenly realm. Yep. And I thought, wow. And then right as he's reading that scripture, this vision happens. Right in front of my face, I'm seeing an alien gray. And then as he's getting to the end of the verse, the vision changes into the most horrific thing I'd ever seen.
Wow.
And I said, stop that video. And both of them looked at me like, what? And I said, stop the video. I need to tell you what I just saw. And I shared with them. And they were like, wow. And I said, the whole time I was in the New Age, I wanted to experience something, but I never really did. Everybody experiences something or looks to experience something in the New Age. The whole thing is about experience.
It is.
And here I become a Christian and I experience something. What is that?
Yeah.
And they're like flabbergasted. And they're like, and I said, I know what this is. And it ain't good. Yes. You don't need to be doing this, especially as Christians. And they said, wow, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
It hit them. You're right. I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And my partner, who I've been working with and founded CE4 with, he says, okay, I'm with you. I said, we're going to tell the group we're not going to do this. We'll shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the plan. A couple of weeks go by, I get this small voice, you're not done. What do you mean I'm not done? No, you're not done. No, I'm done. This is not good. A little while later, take this back to where you came from. Take what back? Take this back to where you came from. This is the truth. Take it back to where you came from. I'm not thinking, does God talk to you? I'm a new believer. Nobody's telling me these things,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, if this is God talking, I says, God, I can't take this back to these people. They don't believe it. They don't believe it to be real. They don't believe you're real. I said, you got to give me something better than this. You already have it. That's what I heard next.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I already have it. So I talked to my partner. I said, "You're not going to believe all this," but I told him, and he goes, "We already have it." Well, let's go see what we have. Had to be something in the tapes. So we went back and looked at the interviews that we had done. And then sure enough, we got to this guy we had interviewed, and we're looking at his tape, rewatching it. And it was a guy that used to come to the meetings, told us about his experiences. He'd had UFO experiences, plus he had abduction experiences. He worked at the Space Center, and he had actually had an abduction experience while working at the Space Center.
Wow.
But the one that was at his home was the one that caught our attention.
Okay.
He was recently married, and he had been introduced to this new church, little church out in a rural area where he lived in Florida, in near where we live, but in a rural area. And he's a brand new believer. And the one thing he remembered, thankfully, was that, in a terrible situation, you can always call on Jesus.
Yep.
The one thing he remembered, not much else at the time, but the important thing he remembered.
Yes.
So this one night, he's telling us the story on the tape. He talks about in the evening before, it started getting dark, he noticed lights across the top of the trees. He thought they were helicopters, looking for guys growing pot in the woods. And
yeah,
stuff.
That type of stuff.
And didn't pay much attention to it. And then the dogs were agitated, which caught his attention. And finally, he went to bed and then went off to sleep. And then all of a sudden, he's in an experience.
Wow.
And in this experience, he's being levitated up in the air. And he says it's the most horrific thing he's ever experienced in his life. Sheer pain and fear. He says it feels like he's being held up in the air with a pole inserted up his rectum and held up there by it. He says it was the most excruciating thing he'd ever experienced. And the only thing he could remember is what he remembered from that little church. And he cries out, "Jesus, Jesus, help me." And instantly
it goes away.
He wakes up in the bed.
Yeah.
And his wife wakes up next to him and says, "Why are you jumping on the bed?" Number 3. And I said, "Did you catch that?" And my partner says, "I did." And I said, that is important. Because at this time, in the mid-90s, nobody had said that it was possible to stop an experience, an abduction experience. A matter of fact, all the leading researchers in the abduction realm said that it was not possible to stop an abduction experience. So I contacted a handful of them, called them at their homes. I said, "Guys, I got an unusual case here. I need to know what to make of it. Is this a hoax? Is this just a misunderstanding, or is this real?" They said, "Tell me what you got." I shared the case with each of them. Each one of them asked, "Can we go off the record?" I said, "Guys, that's fine. You want to go off the record? That's fine. That means I can't tell you who said anything, but I can tell you what they said. This is anonymity. We have to respect that as MUFON researchers." So I would tell them the story, and they responded. They said, "Yes, we've come across cases like that." And I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "Well, we've come across cases where people have said a prayer.
Yes.
They've sung a hymn. They've quoted scripture, or just cried out to Jesus' name, and it stopped an experience." And I said, "Why have we not heard about this? Why have you not spoken about it? Why have you not written about it if this has happened?" They all said the same thing. "We didn't know what to make of it." And I would have been satisfied with that answer.
Yeah.
Because that's an honest answer.
Yes.
But you know what? They weren't satisfied with that answer, because they always followed it up with a second answer. Like that wasn't enough.
Yeah.
The second answer was, "We were afraid to go there because it might affect our credibility in the realm." So by not telling us all the information that we're relying on for the truth, what's that called?
Well, that is called fabricating something or not having a belief.
Or cover up?
Or cover up. Yep.
Or cover up.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody in the realm wants to blame the government for a cover up. Well, I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that the cover up is coming from the researchers you're relying on for the truth.
Joe, hold that thought. We'll be back with part 3 of UFOs and aliens, angels or demons, as we talk with MUFON director in South Korea and co-founder of CE4 Research Group, Joseph Jordan. You're watching Dark Matters with Sky Phillips.